California always reminds us of golden beaches, the Hollywood Hills, celebrity mansions, and all that glitz we see in the movies. But the truth is that this gigantic state hides realities that are far from glamorous. Here on the channel, we've already shown you the not-so-paradisiacal face of Oakland, where gangs control entire neighborhoods, and everything happens on the streets in broad daylight. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out after this video. The dark side of Oakland, to understand how a California city can seem more like purgatory than an American dream. But Oakland isn't the only place that defies the Californian stereotype. In the middle of the Sonoran Desert, there is a community that seems to have come out of a parallel universe, an isolated corner where there is no government, infrastructure, police, or rules. A place where everyone makes their own laws, or simply decides to live without them. This place is called Slab City, and it is known both as the last free city in the United States and as a lawless land. But what does this mean in practice? What makes so many people swap urban life for a barren piece of land with no electricity, no running water, and where the heat is unbearable? Is it just adventure, or is there something deeper behind it? Today, Bello Mundo takes you to one of the most eccentric places in America. Let's find out what life is like in Slab City and what really happens there. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Before we understand life in Slab City, let's locate this peculiar piece of land on the map. It's located in Imperial County, California, in the middle of the Sonoran Desert. We're talking about an arid, hot, and isolated region, about 160 kilometers northeast of San Diego, about 270 kilometers from Los Angeles, and approximately 80 kilometers from the Mexican border. Technically, Slab City can't even be called a real city. It was formed on land owned by the California government, but with no urban structure, no city hall, and no public services of any kind. The name comes from the concrete slabs that remain as vestiges of a decommissioned military base. And yes, we'll get to that part of the story in a moment. The climate? Well, let's just say it's not for the faint-hearted. Winter is bearable, with temperatures between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius. But in summer, my friend, things change. 40 degrees is routine, and on some days the thermometer easily passes 50 degrees. The dry air and the almost total absence of rain make everything even more extreme. The terrain is flat, dry, covered in sand and cacti, with no basic infrastructure. Nearby, to the east, runs the Coachella Canal, which is responsible for bringing water to the region's agricultural areas. But inside Slab City, there is no such amenity. There is no running water. Each resident has to make do as best they can. This extreme isolation gives you an idea of why some people choose this lost corner of the map as a refuge. Some say that the absurd heat and lack of structure are a small price to pay for total freedom. But as we'll see, it's not all peace and love in this equation. Number 2. A bit of history, from military base to no man's land. Now, let's tell the story. To understand how this place came to be, we need to go back to the Second World War in the 1940s. At the time, the US government built a military training camp called Camp Dunlap, a strategic location to train anti-aircraft artillery and Navy personnel, far from major urban centers. The camp officially functioned for 3 years, but with the end of the war, it gradually lost importance until it was completely shut down in 1956. The buildings were dismantled and almost everything was removed. Almost everything. But one thing remained: the concrete slabs, which would give their name to what would come later. Without any plan for occupation, the government transferred the land to the state of California, and the area was sort of abandoned. And that's when the first occupations began. From abandonment to the first homes. At first, it was war veterans who had trained there and decided to return, taking advantage of the concrete slabs to set up makeshift camps. Then nomadic travelers and adventurers began to discover the place. A piece of land with no rules, no taxes, no rent, no supervision. For those who wanted to live away from the government's radar, it seemed perfect. In the 1980s, the fame of the place grew. Some magazines specializing in trailers and camping began to advertise Slab City as a haven for those who wanted to park their motorhomes without paying a cent. And that's how the community began to grow. Over time, Slab City came to have two types of residents: the permanent residents and the so-called snowbirds. The permanent residents are those who live there all year round, facing all kinds of conditions, from extreme heat to the hardships of the desert. Today, it is estimated that around 150 people are part of this group. The snowbirds, on the other hand, are seasonal visitors who arrive in winter to escape the intense cold of states like Washington, Montana, and even Canada. When these people show up, Slab City can have 3,000 to 4,000 people, a huge contrast between the seasons. In the summer, when temperatures hit 50 degrees or more, almost everyone leaves. Those who stay have to be very resilient because there's no electricity, no air conditioning, and the sun never lets up. In winter, the weather improves and Slab City is transformed. The place becomes an alternative meeting place, full of parties, swap meets, impromptu musical performances, and a hippie vibe. But this reputation as the land of freedom has also brought another reputation, and not always a positive one. Number 3. Why is it called the Lawless City? The nickname Lawless City didn't come out of nowhere. Slab City is not a formally recognized city. It doesn't have a town hall, councilors, or any kind of official administration. What does exist is a kind of self-management, where the residents themselves define informal rules about living together. In addition, the police presence in the area is almost non-existent. The Imperial County is responsible for patrolling the area, but the officers only show up when something very serious happens. Small conflicts are usually resolved between the residents themselves, and minor crimes, such as thefts or fights, go unnoticed. Another important detail is that many people go to Slab City just to disappear from the map. Some just want to live without paying taxes or bills. Others, however, are running away from more serious problems. This reinforces the feeling that the place is a no-man's land, where everyone makes their own rules. But that doesn't mean it's total chaos. Even with no police and no government constantly at work, the residents have developed their own codes of conduct. Some areas have a certain level of organization, and local groups impose their own rules. And an important detail, Slab City is still part of the United States. So yes, the law exists, even if it's not always enforced, and we'll talk more about that later. But first, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. It costs nothing, and this way you're supporting the channel to keep bringing you incredible content. And of course, you won't miss a thing and you'll stay on top of everything. Number 4. Relationship with the law and the police. Returning to California, now let's talk about the laws. Because yes, they do exist here, contrary to what many people think. Slab City is on American soil, so the laws of Imperial County and the state of California apply. But if the law exists, why the reputation as a lawless city? The answer is simple, because law enforcement here is very minimalist. The Imperial County Police do some patrols, and when serious crimes like murder or heavy trafficking occur, there is an investigation. But the truth is that many people there simply don't call the police to solve minor problems. Thefts, fights, drug use, trespassing on trailers. All of this ends up being dealt with by the residents themselves, either through dialogue or sometimes through force. This culture of sorting things out for oneself comes very much from the profile of those who live there. People who don't care about the government, who have lost faith in the system, or who simply prefer to live on the margins of society. But of course, more serious cases do happen. Methamphetamine labs have been found in the region, and violent crimes sometimes appear in the news. This reinforces the image of a lawless land, a kind of modern Wild West. But on a day-to-day basis, most of the community lives without major interference. Curiously, it's not even the regular police who show up there most often, but the U.S. Border Patrol. As Slab City is about 80 kilometers from Mexico, agents often monitor the area to check for undocumented immigrants passing through the desert. Apart from that, the place follows its own dynamics, without much outside interference. Number 5. Community dynamics. And here comes the big question. How do these people manage without water, sewage, electricity, garbage collection, or a hospital? The answer is simple. Every man for himself. Those who live there have to make do because there are no functioning public services. There's no town hall, no electricity bills, no garbage truck. Water is one of the biggest challenges. There is an irrigation canal nearby, the Coachella Canal, but the water there is untreated and technically prohibited for human consumption. So most people buy water from water trucks or drive to the nearest town, Nyland, to collect gallons. Those who can store as much as possible to avoid frequent trips. Electricity depends on solar panels or gasoline generators. With a little investment, you can have a working fridge, a fan, and even a portable air conditioner. But if you don't have the money, you can rely on candles, lanterns, and moonlight. Sewage? Forget it. Those who can afford it dig rudimentary pits. Those who can't improvise with dry toilets or buckets. Garbage is also a problem. Some residents drive to landfills outside the region. Others simply burn everything, and many end up throwing it in vacant lots. Without public collection, the dirt accumulates. But what if someone falls ill or has an accident? Then it gets complicated. The nearest hospital is 40 kilometers away in Brawley, and there is no ambulance in Slab City. If you can't get out on your own or rely on someone to help you, you're on your own. That's one of the risks of living far from any infrastructure. Now, the economy there is almost barter. Many people exchange services. Those who know electricity help install solar panels. Those who cook well sell food. Others repair engines, make crafts, or offer small repairs in exchange for essential items. There is no formal trade, but there is a way to survive. The truth is that Slab City is not for everyone. Freedom comes with brutal challenges. Those who stay learn to adapt. Those who can't, leave. Number 6. Art and culture, Salvation Mountain and East Jesus. If on the one hand this piece of land is known for being a kind of no man's land, on the other it has also gained fame for its artistic side. Two places stand out, Salvation Mountain and East Jesus. Salvation Mountain is a huge artificial hill covered in paint, straw, adobe, and concrete, created over almost 3 decades by Leonard Knight, a resident who believed in the message that God is love. He would receive donations of paint and spend entire days painting Bible verses and colorful drawings on the mountain. After his death, The mountain continued to be preserved by volunteers and became one of California's most eccentric attractions. East Jesus, on the other hand, is a veritable open-air gallery where giant sculptures made from scrap metal add a surreal touch to the desert. Cars covered in chaotic paintings, dolls hanging from trees, and walls erected from old bottles make this place a haven for experimental artists. It's a free space where anyone can create their own art, and many visitors to Slab City stop by to check out the crazy creations. Number 7. Social life, leisure, and unusual curiosities. You might ask yourself, but what do these people do for fun? Well, in Slab City, the concept of leisure is very particular. There's no shopping mall, no movie theater, no public park with infrastructure. What does exist are improvised spaces and events created by the residents themselves. One of the most famous spots is The Range, an open-air stage full of old sofas, repurposed chairs, and a sound system that's a bit shabby, but works. Every Saturday night, there is a talent show where anyone can sing, play the guitar, recite poetry, or simply perform. This is where Slab City's main nightlife comes in. People get together, bring drinks, and spend the night playing music or just hanging out. Although it may seem like the end of the world, there are locals who install satellite routers and offer paid or donated coffee with internet access. So yes, you can have breakfast in the middle of the desert while charging your phone and chatting with neighbors. It's all very simple, but it gives the place a minimal sense of modern socialization. When the winter population arrives, they sometimes organize theme parties, gala balls with thrift store clothes, bonfire gatherings, and even a kind of ball for adults who never had the chance to go to one as teenagers. It's all organized by the residents themselves, with zero formality, but full of creativity. Number 8. Slab City's future. Despite all the aura of freedom, Slab City's future is not guaranteed. The land belongs to the state of California, and from time to time there are proposals to sell the area. There has been talk of turning it all into a solar energy farm, creating an environmental reserve, or simply auctioning off the land, as the law says that any money from the sale would go to the state teachers' pension fund. There is always some discussion about what to do with the site. The residents know this and are trying to organize themselves, creating community groups to fight against possible eviction. But this creates a dilemma. If they organize too much, they lose their anarchic spirit. If they don't, they run the risk of being evicted out of the blue. For the time being, Slab City continues to exist on the basis of uncertainty. It could go on like this for years, or it could be that from one day to the next, someone buys it all up and wipes out this last free city in America. Nobody knows what lies ahead. But until then, chaos and creativity continue to reign in this piece of desert where anything or nothing can happen. So, what did you think of this parallel universe called Slab City? Would you have the courage to give up city life and face the desert heat to live away from bills and laws? Tell us in the comments what your choice would be. If you liked this content, share it with everyone who loves a curious story, and don't forget to subscribe to Bello Mundo to follow us on more adventures and unusual places. Thank you for being with us so far, and see you next time.